you are successful. And if some people's definition of you can't have ADHD because you're successful, which is false, we have to then talk about, just for a second, why those struggles are there for you and how difficult it is to appear successful.
There was an element of frustration from them. We'd given you an amazing education. You know, what's wrong with you? So I'm now thinking, what's wrong with me? Because inside I've got ambition, I've got a fire in me to want to do stuff, and I've got this energy.
You've got to there despite all of those challenges and struggles. Plus, your ADHD enables you to be that super focused, great communicator, great learner.
But then I'm in a position where I'm in my worst case scenario. There's nearly 100 people sat around, fingers pointed at, and then I haven't been listening.
How did that make you feel?
I'd freeze, and I hated that attention. You clearly weren't listening. What about you? Bad kid. If people buy people, and I've found something that works there, what can I do? What do I want to do that would have a purpose behind it, that would get me out of bed in the morning and can make me some money?
What was the trigger moment that gave you the confidence to say to me, I need an assessment? You always say when we start an interview, I'm really looking forward to this. They're my words right now.
I can tell.
I really am looking forward to this. You and I have been on a journey of talking to a lot of great people, and there's more to come. You've gone on a personal journey. And as I've seen you, as we've conducted 15, 16 interviews together, suddenly start to question yourself and actually think, have I got ADHD? And we've talked about it along the way. What happened for you yesterday?
Well, I'm less than 24 hours diagnosed. So this time yesterday, I was still waiting to have my call with the lovely Rachel. And going into that call, I was fully expecting to be diagnosed with ADHD. It would have been more confusing or thrown up more questions if I hadn't, because of that journey where things have resonated, things you say, all the time you spent around people, and I'm thinking, I do that. You know, that's something that resonates for me. There have been a few occasions before yesterday along that journey where there have been people that have said to me, oh, you don't have ADHD because you don't do this. And I've gone, oh, and that could be someone quite authoritative as well. So to get to yesterday, to be told that you're kind of bouncing off the end of the scale, ADHD, like there's no question, it was supportive of so many thoughts, so many things and experiences I've had. But it also then threw up a whole load of emotion of like, actually, because you asked a lot of questions to get to that point that take you back to younger years. So it pieces things together.
Yeah, and let's stay with that for a second then, because, you know, when I first met you, super intelligent. I see you as a super achiever. I'm incredibly proud to be a friend, and I follow in your footsteps. And all of those things, when people classify ADHD and talk about it in a classic setting, would say, well, he can't have ADHD because of all of that. And yet here we are, you have ADHD. So as you've said, the outward optics, you can't have ADHD. But then you went through a journey yesterday and in prep over the weekend. Let's go way, way, way back. Because some of the questions you were asked yesterday, I know, took you way back to being a kid, didn't they?
Yeah.
And we talked about you as a parent now for your kids. What was it, in a nutshell, when you went back with some of those questions? What was it that really started to resonate with you yesterday with Rachel?
So a lot of what we've talked about together and with guests is that misunderstood. People talking about their lived experience of, you know, if only I could have known, and if someone could have told me. And that's often based on them really not dealing with the situation particularly well, or not having anyone to talk to, feeling really isolated, feeling really alone. And that's where I went back to at a really lonely period of my life. And you know me as someone that what you just said about me is lovely. A lot of it's untrue, but friendship and having someone to talk to and building a tribe of people I can be around now and pick the phone up to and spend time with is a pleasure. And I don't take it for granted, because I have been someone that, being completely honest, couldn't and didn't talk to my parents about how I was feeling, couldn't talk to any teachers, and couldn't talk to my friends. And a little bit of what you just said then about perhaps coming across as intelligent and capable and confident, I was masking. I was really confused. I was not really understanding my own behavior. And I took a long time to work that out. And of course, I now know at 47 years old, I've got ADHD. I'd never even heard of it until relatively recently. So I was bouncing around, making lots of mistakes, avoiding situations, and no one knew why I was doing it.
Let's talk about avoiding situations for a second. How do you learn now? What's your learning style, would you say?
What's my learning style? I think lived experiences from other people. We've talked on programs about the success, if you like, of Alcoholics Anonymous, where it's storytelling and it's lived experiences of people. And there are some people that come into that environment and they will not talk for the first 2, 3, 10 sessions. And then over time, they see the vulnerability of other people. They see the support. They see that someone didn't step into the ring and then get punched in the face and, there wasn't anything that was untoward, and then you come through. So I think friendships, professional relationships that have allowed me to learn from others and make sense of myself and take those learnings and go, why don't I try that? Habit building.
What was it like in school trying to learn?
So there's two things there. There's learning almost how to live, and then there's learning academically.
Yeah.
I was the kid at school that was looking out of the window. And I'm very visual and I'm very creative. So I'm now not just out there on the field, but I'm kicking a ball around, or I'm doing something. And then the teacher would say, and I'd hear it from a distance, and then I'd look back into the room and the teacher would say, Reynolds, what do you think? Oh, I've got no idea.
We talked earlier, just off, not in prep for this. We were just talking generally about you managed to get to university, and what was the course again? Was it
tourism studies?
Tourism studies.
Because I loved traveling. I'd done a lot of traveling, and took a year out to travel. So I thought, and at least there was some thought process. I thought, follow something I'm interested in.
Ratio of boys to women in that.
You remember well. Yeah. 87 people on the course. 6 guys, which I was one.
And you talked about the tutor often wanting a male perspective, and therefore the ratio was 1 of 6. And you talked about how that felt to be in that lecture theatre.
There's a bit of previous to that, and it's really relevant to what you were kind of asking me. I started avoiding situations. I started missing lessons at school. And often they were lessons that I knew I might be asked to do a presentation. We might all be doing some kind of a talk. And if it was coming up to my turn, I'd mysteriously not turn up. And do you know what's really frustrating is, even at that point, if it was something that potentially I might have been half interested in or done a good job on, I'd built up a lack of confidence that came out in a sort of trembling voice, or just my heart would be beating at my chest before I needed to do anything like that. So I talked myself out of it. I'd go to the toilet 10 minutes before but not come back. Can you imagine the trouble I get in for that?
Yeah.
And so I wasn't a bad kid, and I knew I wasn't, but I was in all the detentions, and I was punished in all the ways that you miss the bit you enjoy. I'd be doing a detention or having a punishment during the time when you get to play in the field, sport. So back to your point, I've gone to university for the right reasons, sort of. All my friends had gone. That's a good point, actually. In the end, I was like, I haven't really worked out what I want to do, so this is what you do. And all my friends had done that. To them in a position where I'm in my worst case scenario, there's nearly 100 people sat around. Sometimes those lectures would have other courses around you, so there could be 200-300 people in, and then fingers pointed at you. And then I haven't been listening. I've been talking to the girl next to me or something.
How did that make you feel?
I'd freeze, and I hated that attention. And I hated the fact that I hadn't been concentrating. So I actually kind of almost felt I'm letting the lecturer down. And you can see the disappointment. You clearly weren't listening. What about you? Bad kid.
So we go from there, and I'm going to go right fast forwards to where we met, because that John Reynolds isn't the guy that approached me at Ideas Fest and said, we need to talk. Although I can see the parallels. For one, you had the guts to go and broker that conversation And I was there with two colleagues. You just went straight in and said, we need to talk. And bloody hell, who's he? How'd you get from there to there?
I went a long way down. I actually pulled out of university,
Mm-hmm.
and I got pretty lost in my head, lost in terms of wasn't doing too much. Rightly or wrongly, my parents allowed me to stay at home, but I wasn't happy at home. And it wasn't their problem to solve, but I hadn't worked out what I wanted to do. There was an element of frustration from them. We've given you an amazing education. What's wrong with you? So I'm now thinking, what's wrong with me? Because inside, I've got ambition. I've got a fire in me to want to do stuff. And I've got this energy. And when I was in any way channeled into something that I wanted to do, I was relentless.
Mm-hmm.
But I was putting no energy into anything. So that was a really tough time. That was depression, ultimately, looking back on it. And the answer to your question is I kind of bounced along the bottom and thought, I'm achieving nothing, I'm not doing anything. So what can I control? What can I concentrate on? So I'd always kept fit, and I wasn't at this time. So I started going for a run again, getting down and doing some press-ups. I started calling friends and saying, when can we get together? And then I started looking at work and exploring. And I went into some very, very menial jobs that were actually very humbling, and saw that the whole side of life where I was like, what am I moaning about? And then the brain started going, well, what can you do? What are your skill sets? Because you've hidden away from academic side of things. I scraped through my exams. I got a handful of, I was always good at English. So I got good grades in English, and then sort of went down to C's and D's through history and so on. So I wasn't going to go the academic route. And I ended up in sales. And I went into sales where I really learnt the connection of people. So how we connected, how you reacted to me, and the fact that I can influence that. And it didn't actually matter then what I was selling, because at the time I was selling something I wasn't passionate about at all. So I'll probably fast forward from a learning process there to be like, well, actually, if people buy people, and I've found something that works there, what can I do? What do I want to do that would have a purpose behind it, that would get me out of bed in the morning and can make me some money? I was financially ambitious. And that was a relatively slow journey, but that's what started pulling me out, because I started seeing the results, validation, getting stimulation from it.
And where did that go? Where did the building start? Where did the
property side of things?
Property side.
The property side of things started from a very clear scenario that you didn't need to be academic.
Yeah.
It was relationships. So some of the wealthiest people around me were doing very well with property development. And I could see that it was, again, relationship side of things. These people were taking each other out for lunch, and they were saying, come to me. So what do I need? It's capital intensive. So I'll make sure I've got people with money around me if I can be the one that finds a good deal. I need to be around the people that are architects and planning consultants that can help me. So it was about building, we use that word a lot, tribe. And I was able to start doing that through my business to business sales. From the age of sort of 24, 25, I was already thinking, well, there's a cap of what I can earn here. So the ambition then was, okay, you could actually probably make a lot more money out of property development, and then you can bring those people together. And that literally is where that all developed.
And that's carried on as how you work, isn't it? That's how I've seen you network. You are a networker on an Olympic scale, if not beyond. Let's come back now to a bit more about you. That's the journey, and that's got you into the television. That's got you into the networking. And if I had have asked you, who is John Reynolds? I didn't deliberately, because that's your favourite question when you start an interview. I'd describe you as a networker, people who brings people together for the greater good, builds tribes with a purpose, and whatever that's based on. That's my impression of you, which may be false or whatever. Let's talk about that ADHD thing again. Let's go back to that. And I doubted at first when you said, I think I've got ADHD. I thought, that's interesting. I'm going to have to look harder now. And then I did start to look harder and find things. What do you think I was finding? What do you think I was finding?
That's an interesting question.
It's deliberate.
So going back to the kind things you said to me earlier, I think to be able to perform and perfect as close to possible the things that I guess I am good at, I've had to work so hard at them.
Yeah.
And that goes back to childhood as well. My parents were really big on spelling. So it was just something I focused on and I struggled with, but it got better and better and better. And I'm really good at it. but there's so many other things around that sort of that I'm not. So when you met me, there's an element of I'm very natural. I wear my heart on my sleeve, and this is not an effort to just be looking in the eye and enjoying a conversation, but the brain of like, what else can we do together? What's the synergy? I'd like to introduce Phil to him. That's what's going on in my head, and it's organized chaos. And I think because you saw that, there's opportunity creation. There's a lot of value add there, which I enjoy coming up with and I enjoy working with. Since we started working together, becoming good friends and so on, there's an element then of probably organizational mess, admin and so on. And I can only imagine that's where you're a bit like, John, we're filming tomorrow. You haven't sent me anything about who's coming or something like that. And that's the bit that I potentially let myself down with.
Yeah, and the reason I want to stay with that just for a second, playing with you a little bit unfairly, but I think it's really important, is you are successful. And if some people's definition of you can't have ADHD because you're successful, which is false, we have to then talk about, just for a second, why those struggles are there for you and how difficult it is to appear successful, so that people don't see this as a bandwagon you've jumped on because you're doing a television series about it. Does that make sense? So you qualify your ADHD despite being successful and lean, fit man who's achieving things. When you send a WhatsApp, how do you send a WhatsApp?
What do you mean?
When you send me a message or anybody a message, how do you use that device?
I use it like a magic wand.
Right. And you always send a voice message, don't you?
Typically.
Why is that?
Personable. And I know that in that voice note, I might also be thinking, oh, and I wanted to ask you this as well, and I wanted that, and it takes me too long. And you can probably instantly turn around and say that's potentially because of the ADHD, but I am thinking about 3 or 4 different things, and I will get it out. I will get it out in a voice note. If I'm typing it, I need to say this, and then I'll think about something else and I've forgotten it.
Yeah. And I asked that because that was my presumption.
That's very observant.
And when I get a voice note from you, I now play them at 1.5 speed so that I can hear that all happening, because it does, your voice notes go. And whilst I'm on that, and there's nothing, and before I go, I just want to, and then it stops, and then another one comes. I said, I forgot to say such and such and such and such. And unless you're looking for what, that's a coping mechanism, isn't it? That's the perfect where you've used technology to enable you. A generation back, we didn't have that option, did we? You would have been, well, you wouldn't have been typing a message, you'd been writing a letter or not bothering. So I see that. And the other one I wanted to probe is, you're a busy man. And people say, if you want to get something done, you go to a busy man, don't you? How busy does it get for you?
Yeah, I'm working till midnight every night, and then my brain wakes myself up 5:30 most mornings, which is not enough sleep. And how many people do I get to talk to that are successful in our world, in filming around this table? Next guest, classic. I know I should be probably reducing how much I do, condensing it, saying no to a few things, and prioritizing what is ultimately my mental and physical health. And you're right, there's all sorts of things I do that I do keep fit, healthy, try and eat well most of the time, but I'm busy, but I'm enjoying it. And I'm enjoying this particular phase of my life because of the mission alignment, the purpose, the passion. And I think there's an element, and you've heard me ask a very similar question to guests and people, where that suppression of almost like a cork in the bottle. I feel like at times in my life previously, I wasted time. I wasn't sure what to do. So I'm thriving right now in an environment where I'm really enjoying it, and I'm trying to do loads.
Yeah.
But without burning out.
Well, that's the next part, isn't it? When does John Reynolds get to take time out? And how do you do that?
So I have always had potentially too many hobbies. And at previous times in my life, I've got out on my mountain bike. I've gone out for a run. I love being on, in, or near the water. So that could be any number of things, from water skiing to fishing to just running down the beach. That's taking a massive hit right now. So I make sure it's a beautiful day outside today. So we're filming all day today. So at some point tomorrow, I'll make that time and I'll get out in a London park, close as I can get. I'll point my face at the sun and I'll just have a whole moment of being present. It's not as much as I'd like in a busy week in London, but at some point, Friday, this weekend, I'll then make time to go for a swim. I'll make time for a real walk in nature and appreciate it and just leave the phone. Time with the family, try and be present, do something with them. My youngest is horse riding. So wherever I can at the weekend, if I can get out and tick that box of being in the fresh air and encourage and be around summer, I try and do that as much as possible.
You've introduced family there. If they were here and I said to your wife, what about John and his potential for ADHD prior to yesterday and the assessment, what would she say?
So it's a really interesting conversation, and I kind of knew you'd bring that in. And if you think about it, I got diagnosed at like 6:15 last night. It's something like 2:00 p.m. today. I then got on a train to come to London. So we had this sort of patchy conversation. She was asking me how I feel. And I was telling her similar stuff to what I'm telling you. And I was like, it's not a surprise. I'm not going to be using it as an excuse. It makes sense. And but the relevant bit that she brought up was, would you understand now from my point of view? Yeah. That a lot of the time you insist on doing this or you say that and you're right. And she's not coming up from an arrogant point, but just like this insistence. And she's like, well, you might not be. And maybe our parenting side brought quite a lot into question. And we had a similar conversation this morning. And that's spinning in my head now. I mentioned about the emotional bit, which relates to being a parent as well. Mm-hmm. A lot of the questions that I was asked, it was a really interesting process to go through actually, because, you're asked questions about things you've done a long time ago. And when you're a parent, your children are potentially going through that journey right now.
Yep.
Which is directly relevant to Leslie, my wife, as well, right? Where I might not be disciplining my daughter in a way that she wants to because she's so annoyed that this has happened. But I'm quietly thinking, that's what I used to do. Yeah. She's got that from me. Now with my diagnosis, she's literally probably
reliving your life
from me.
Yeah.
So I think there's an element of guilt that has gone with the diagnosis where I told Lily, my oldest, I told her last night and then this morning, and she said, oh, right, so that makes a lot more sense of why I do this now.
Yeah. You talked about guilt there, and there's this, if I had a pen and paper, I'd draw it, the Kubler-Ross curve, a curve that describes the different emotions of grief. And we apply it quite a lot in the ADHD world to somebody who's just recently received a diagnosis, because you can plot out generally how people are going to feel. First of all, I remember a TV personality that we worked with who described her pink cloud of finally getting that understanding that here I am now, and I've got that understanding. But then that very quickly morphs into what could I have done? What could have been different? What could have been easier? What could I have achieved? Where are you with your emotions? Because you are looking back and you're looking back to you're a very quick processor. And I think you've probably accelerated some of this already, looking back into your childhood and applying that now to your parenting of your children. Where are you with your emotions as you look back then, do you think?
So I mentioned to you that I felt emotional on the train last night thinking about it when I started thinking about some of the questions I've been asked and relating that to how I've been parenting and how I feel towards my kids. Because I'm big on empathy. I always have. Always thinking, how is this for Phil? What's he thinking? What's she thinking? And then I'm also never keen to be a hypocrite. So you don't want to be saying, when one of my daughters knocks a glass off the table as she gets up, and then I have a right go at her about it, when actually I'm just as likely to do it myself and probably did it last week. It's that hypocrisy where it's like, well, I'm not going to blow up about it. Just say, oh, okay, you're right. Grab a towel, clean up the water, sweep up the glass. Whereas my wife's view would be like, oh, you clumsy did it. And she wants to, it's frustrating for her. And she wants to kind of almost.
Which is an entirely normal reaction, isn't it?
I'm not doing that.
Right.
I'm like, okay, it's happened. And so because I've done it so many times, that is something I still have to work on. So back to the emotional side of things, there's two things. There's the thoughts about how I'm looking at it into my family. And then there's the fact that I must have lost 20 pairs of AirPods and headphones left. I'll leave the jacket on the back of the chair. And sometimes the only reason why I realise I've left my jacket is because my car key's in it.
Yeah.
And I'm going, where's my car key? And that naked moment, I've had far too many times in my life. And I'm quite a quick learner. That's just something I have to work so hard. I'm the guy at the airport that's patting my pocket, making sure the passport's in my, because I've turned up at the airport before without my passport, or I've turned up at the airport with one of my family's passport. I've not checked, just plucked it out of the drawer, and there's these
I gave you a Tangle toy this morning, and the first thing you said to me was, "That's exactly what I did." With was it a headphone lead that you had on when you were going
on the call yesterday with Rachel. So we're an hour in, and I'm good on eye contact. So whatever I'm doing under the table is the same thing. I've got nothing to fidget with, but it's a video call, and I've got the charging lead, as you say, for my phone, and I'm wrapping it around. Funny enough, exactly that. Wrapped it around my finger 4 times. I'm checking it whilst having eye contact. I'm just fidgeting, and she said, "Do you ever struggle to sit still and fidget?" And I kind of went to say, "Oh, I think I'm all right with that." And I just literally held up, actually, I have not stopped fiddling with this for an hour. She just kind of, another tick in the box.
So my point of those questions, if I can be that bold, to put you through that level of scrutiny publicly, it is to just affirm that you've got your struggles, you've had your struggles, you mask, you've had challenges, you look back and you can see where it could have been easier and better, which is overlaid by a very successful man with a wonderful family life and a great career. And we shouldn't just see that veneer that sits on top as a reason not to look for those struggles, challenges, and what have you. And that's one of the real reasons I wanted to interview you about your ADHD, because I look up to you. I see you as a success. You don't see what goes on, do you? The swan gracefully.
That's such a good analogy, or the iceberg.
The iceberg. And I wanted to pull that through with, and I wanted my emotion of the reverence I have to you and the pedestal I have you on, for people to actually understand that you've got to there despite all of those challenges and struggles. Plus, your ADHD enables you to be that super focused, great communicator, great learner. There's not a lack of intelligence going on here. It's a lack of ability to do certain things in a certain way, isn't it? And a challenge to do certain things in a certain way. And for me, the inspiration you give me daily in our work, I want that to go into the camera and out through the editing suite into other people, because I'm hopeful that the connection we've got comes through here. That look, accept that veneer level. The swan is gracefully gliding. The iceberg looks great, 7/10 of it below the water, and the 7/10 of the dangerous bits. So as we wrap this around now, what was the trigger moment that gave you the confidence to say to me, I need an assessment? Can you remember?
The trigger moment. So I heard you at Ideas Fest in a talk where people couldn't even get in. And I was thinking, I now want to get in. What's going on in there? FOMO. I listened to enough to be like, he's a nice guy. He knows what he's talking about. And he's talking about something that's really interesting to me. And why? Why am I drawn to this? So there must have been a resonance, empathy, and personal interest. And so I couldn't, as soon as you walked into the bar, and I've said this to you before, getting between a big man and a pint is always tricky. And you looked like you needed that pint. And I was like, I need to grab him now. To then have a conversation with you that led to other conversations and wanting to share people's stories and learning from you, and you saying enough, it was like, oh gosh, this is now where I'd been quietly thinking, don't I? Maybe. I want to know now, and I really feel like I actually have it. And I think, to answer your question on point about an actual moment, I think it was a build-up of like almost pouring into a cup, and it was like, Phil, can I? Because I remember when I first asked you, and I was quite tentative. I was a bit like, actually, can I go through the process? And you didn't bat me back, but you just sort of were like, well, we can come to that. And I was like, oh, he doesn't think I've got it, so maybe I don't. So I think I backed off. But that moment was, my glass had filled up enough where I was like, I feel like I'm in this tribe.
Well, you came back at me, and that gave me something when you came back, because there was a bit of qualification going on there. Not playing with you, we'd have gone there, but just wanted to qualify where you were.
I think you manifest things. I think if you are thinking something, you get. So I started gravitating to other entrepreneurs that had ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
And I might well have been seeing that in their Instagram profile, thinking about inviting them on Extraordinary Stories or wanting to meet them for business interests. And then the fact that they got ADHD, and then you bring that into conversation. And there was definitely, I forget who it was definitely someone I met with that made me want to come back to you and go, yeah, I need to find this out now.
So now you know, we all know, and the world will know, that John Reynolds has ADHD. We talk a lot about shame. Do you have shame?
Do I have shame? No.
No? Good.
No.
No.
No. And I think I've come through a good education process on that. I think I hesitate because of the guilt element about almost like, what could I have done any different, right? But, my kids going, oh, great.
So if we're going to change the narrative about ADHD, this is a journey we're on together, isn't it? Removing the shame and changing the narrative. What's the one big thing that your diagnosis does that will take us further to change that narrative, do you think?
I can talk with empathy now. A few times I've sat with you and I've been wanting to say, oh, I know the feeling. And then it's like, well, you can't actually say that because you're not diagnosed. I never want to use it as an excuse or a label, but I can come at it from a position of knowledge and lived experience. And we know how powerful that is.
Yeah.
So I now can, and I felt different today, genuinely. I've learned so much from you and my feelings towards you and what we're doing, which is far more than just a program, right? We're trying to make change. So I'm even more aligned. I'm even more determined to try and help the education system, if you like, be a better place for people like me. That you spot the masking, you spot the behaviour early. Because if someone had said to me, "You didn't want to do that presentation, did you?" I may well have gone, right, have a chat with me.
Mm.
That's the emotional bit, because that could have stopped a long, long period of my life where I hid, but I did it well because I know there were people around me that thought I thought I was confident and I was hiding and I was choosing where to avoid and where to go. That's really restricting.
So who is John Reynolds?
Who is John Reynolds? I always say I'm always learning. I'm someone that's trying to match opportunity to good people, and it's a pleasure doing it. And that's my journey. I haven't got a destination. What's our destination with this, right?
Yeah.
It's to like keep sharing more information, try and make a difference, and enjoy it at the same time.
Cheers, buddy.
Cheers, Phil.
Good chat.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you.